Hello, and thank you for joining us this month for Tiger Talk. I'm Superintendent Jeremy Williams. I'm joined this month with Sarah Kirchner, our Director of Finance. Thank you for joining me today, Sarah.
Absolutely.
Got a few things we want to talk about. Exciting time of the year for the schools. We're back to school. All the kids are back in classes now as of a couple days ago, so that's always a fun time for us. Love getting to that. And just talking about back to school this year, the referendum's a big conversation, so we're going to talk about that and kind of share some updates with you all, so you know what's going on in the schools and kind of what we're working on this fall. So we're going to just dive right into it this year. All right, first thing I want to talk about is our mission statement. That's really where we ground everything that we do is in that mission statement. Our mission statement is about preparing all learners for success. That's what we look at, we talk about when we're setting goals, we're talking about success stories, we're talking about everything that's going on in our district. So as we think about preparing all learners for success, that looks a lot different today than it did a number of years ago. Over the past few years, you've heard us talk a lot about those job skill pieces and the career and technical education that happens in our schools. The Career and Technical Center that we've opened is a big piece, and that's all part of that conversation. We've also recognized, more so in recent years than ever in the past, how much we rely on community to help us do that job and prepare our learners. As a school, you think about reading, math, science, social studies, how important that is, but we look at the learner and preparing for success. It's so much bigger than that. It's talking about what job opportunities exist, what kind of skills do you need for those jobs, and a lot of conversations taking place with local business owners and with different community members about how they can connect to our students and how our students can become part of maybe what's going on right here in our own community and even wider than that. So that's a big part of the mission statement. We realize that meeting that need of the whole community is a big part of what we do and how we do that together. So that's something we're proud of, something that we spend a lot of time on, and certainly a success area for our school. Thinking about a refresh and thinking about kind of what happened over the summer. It's been a really busy summer. We had a lot going on this summer. I think, Sarah, you hear a lot when you work in the school, like, oh, summer must be really quiet. Well, this summer was not quiet, and most summers aren't quiet, but why don't you talk a little bit about kind of some things from this summer in Marshall Public Schools?
Yeah, so it was a very busy summer here leading up to this coming school year. One of the major projects that we did accomplish over the summer was our high school building automated control system. So one might ask, what is that? And what that actually does is it controls our heating, the cooling, the ventilation, and the lighting systems throughout the entire high school building. And believe it or not, that high school is actually 20 years old this year.
The new high school.
The new high school is 20 years old. So it was getting to the point where that system was becoming outdated and all the systems within it were not speaking to each other, so to speak, where we needed to do a walkthrough and go through and update that system so we could manage all of the systems together and keep our classrooms and our gyms and all of our facilities under that one roof comfortable for our students coming into this school year and provide consistent airflow and temperatures and really manage those temperatures across the building a little better. And it also will result in energy savings by having those controls back in place and up and running smoothly. So that was a big project that we took on this year, but we've got it completed with our kids now in session, and we have heard some comments already from teachers that they are appreciating that things seem to be leveled out nicely throughout the building and everybody's feeling comfortable. And then another big project, unfortunately that was unexpected, was due to all of the rain we received this summer. I think we all know it rained just a little bit here in Marshall throughout the summer. So unfortunately, one of those big rainstorms did have a pretty significant effect on our middle school, specifically in one wing of the building. And we ended up with some significant water intrusion and damage into one wing of the building. And primarily it had to do with plumbing and one of the bathrooms primarily that ended up being flooded. We had quite a bit of what we've been calling sludge flow through that wing of the building, unfortunately, due to the break in the plumbing lines. So we ended up having to jackhammer out some floors, replace quite a bit of flooring due to that damage. But we could not be more impressed with all of our community partners that basically these guys dropped everything, came to our aid, and got working as soon as they could within, the next day.
Yeah,
we really had
immediately.
people in place taking a look at things, figuring out what needed to be done. Luckily, this happened in July, so we did have about a month to get everything repaired, but there was a lot of work that went into that. Everything is back in order and up and running in that wing. We have classes running. The flooring was replaced, sheetrock and such, but we got through that project as well this summer.
Yeah, the pictures on the screen there that we shared, they're from the flooding from that event, so it certainly was a huge mess, and like Sarah said, just very grateful to everyone that showed up and helped put that back together for us.
Yeah, one other project that we took on was doing some work on revamping our emergency planning procedures. And we really wanted to have this in place coming into this next year. And the primary goal was to get all of our buildings running the consistent protocols from building to building, so we all know exactly what to do in the event of an emergency. And these emergencies can range from a number of different issues. If there's a medical emergency, to an intruder, to a fire. There's so many different things that can happen at the spur of a moment, anytime, and we want to have all of our staff on the same page and students to know exactly what needs to be done in the case of these types of emergencies. So we rolled this out to our students and staff already this year. What we have here is what you'll see in every classroom and hallway throughout all of our buildings, so people can at a glance know what to do in case of an emergency.
So again, going back to talking about kind of what's going on this year, we always end the year with a needs assessment. We talk about what's going on in the schools, where are the needs that we see, look at some data. We talk about a number of different data points and use that to ground what we do for the next year. So the needs assessment from last year, kind of what we've seen the last few years actually, we're seeing every year a greater number of kids with greater number of needs. And that's true in a lot of different districts, but we see a lot of needs where we really need to think about intervention, not just the core instruction. Of course, we always talk about core instruction, but those high levels of support that are needed continue to be a big thing in our district. We also look at our student population, thinking about our demographics with our students, and what we're seeing there every year is a more diverse student population than we've ever seen, not just in ethnicity, but in variety of needs as well, with academic needs as well. So that continues to be a big focus for us, big conversation for us. And we go back to that mission statement where I started today, is thinking about the preparing all learners for success. A lot of things continue to revolve around that. Certainly with the career and technical education, our kids are saying that's important to us. We're hearing the community say that's important to us. And the state, the high levels of accountability. More than ever, we're seeing requirements from the state, expectations from the state that we need to make sure we're meeting. We'll talk a lot about the READ Act and about some things around with reading instruction. That's a big focus for this year, but certainly that comes back to state and how are we meeting all those individual student needs. Looking at some data from last year, for a number of years we've used NWA as our primary benchmark, if you will, I guess, for testing. We've used that for reading and for math. This year there's going to be some changes with that, but I'll talk about last year first because that's the data points we have. At benchmark would be, another way of saying that might be the students at grade level in those areas. So are they performing at the level that a typical student in that age would, if you will. So we set goals each year based off of where we were the previous year and our students, and having more students at that level the next year. You'll see in both reading and math, we did meet our goals. So those percentages, using that NWA assessment, the 59 and 69%, those are high percentages in that, high percentage of kids at the level. NWA would say about half your kids should be right at that midline, and we exceeded that in both reading and math and met the goal. So more students at the grade level benchmark than we had the previous year. So that's exciting. That's good news. We also look at students meeting growth. So we talk about students meeting growth. You think about the kid with the greater academic needs, a student with special needs or a student with an EL learner or whatever else might be going on. They're farther from the benchmark score. So they might not hit the benchmark score, but we say, is that student growing toward the benchmark score? So we measure growth as well. 70% is our target has been our target for percentage of students meeting growth in reading and math each year. When we've talked to NWA about that, they tell us that's an extremely high level of students meeting benchmark. We exceeded that in a big way in both reading and in math. So very excited about what we see in that, and that's been some continual growth that we're proud of in our school district. So then thinking about setting our plans for this year, our theme this year, we do a theme every year with professional development for our staff. We're talking about relentless excellence is what we focused on this year. We had some professional development workshop week with teachers around it, and that's what we're working on this year. Specific work around the READ Act. That's you've heard us talk about the last couple of years. That's it started with just our primary level, our lowest level students, but it's working its way up into even the high school now, doing work around the science of reading and really understanding how kids learn how to read and measuring that growth, and very, very targeted instruction and intervention provided. So that continues to be ongoing focus with the state and for us, and we're seeing huge growth. I'm going to show you some data here in just a minute about that. Assessments and data tracking, there's some changes with the state around that, so we're see some big changes with our assessments this year, specific to the READ Act, but it's going to impact some math things too as we change some testing. New curriculum, our ELA, our English Language Arts curriculum, has been up for review. We've selected new curriculum K through 12. There'll be new pieces in place there for students. Standards-based has been how we've measured students' success in the classroom or academic success in the classroom, so that's continuing to be refined and worked on. And of course, the operating referendum is what we wanted to spend some time talking about today too. When we look at those academic gains happening in the classrooms, there's a lot of great things taking place in our classrooms. Test scores, I've mentioned, are increasing. Early literacy success, this is that piece I wanted to mention with the READ Act. So where we've spent the most time on science of reading is at Parkside Elementary with our youngest learners. Darcy called me at the end of last year. DIBELS is the assessment we've been using to measure some of that growth with our youngest learners. That will continue to happen. She called and said we had 91% of our students in kindergarten and first grade grow at least one level on that assessment this year, and nobody went backwards. That's of all students with all need levels in the students in the building. So when she called me and told me that last spring, I made her go back and double check, as I said, that just can't be right. We've never had that percentage of students at that high of scores, and that's where we were. So that's impressive. That's great work that's happening in our classrooms. That's really reflective of the work our teachers are doing and that individualized instruction we spent a lot of time talking about. So that's exciting for us. Certainly continue to close gaps, and that's looking at those students with a greater level of needs again and thinking about how are they doing and how are they growing and how are we meeting the individual needs. We spent a lot of time tracking that data as well and looking at that and making sure that we're meeting those needs of every student. With meeting the needs of every student, the CTE work continues to be important for us. The CTI Center, we opened that a couple years ago. That continues to see growth. We see enrollment up out there this year. We have Pathways to Success, so those are those classes that happen all the way down to elementary level, preparing students for the CTE work at the high school level. And really we continue to try to make real-world connections for our students, thinking about those job opportunities that exist and job skill opportunities that exist. So that continues to all be focused on us, those hands-on educational pieces that are a big piece of what happens in our schools. Some additional things that we work on and we continue to talk about. BAR program, we've done a few Tiger Talk conversations about that. We've had BAR at the high school this is our 7th year, I believe, with BAR at the high school. That's where we started with it. It's an intentional conversation about meeting kids, forming relationships with our students, where they're feeling connected to at least one staff member in the school and connections with each other, and then also looking at a number of different data points, some academic data, some attendance data, some behavioral data, all those different pieces, and talking about how are we meeting the individual needs again of the students. That's just a way that we do that. Again, at the high school, we've done it for a number of years. Within the last 3 years, we brought that into Southfield Elementary and to our middle school, and we're seeing success there as well. So it's a program we continue to do some work with, and really it's work that's paying off. It is extra work for our teachers. We recognize that, and they are excited about that work because it is so successful with our students. Through that work last year, looking at attendance alone, I've some middle school data up here. We had 150 students the previous year who were chronically truant. Chronically truant means they've missed at least 10% of the school year. Last year, having some intentional conversations and some work with BAR, that number dropped from 150 to 95. So some significant growth there. We'll continue to work on that this year. And then looking at behavior incidents, as students are feeling more connected to school and we're having some of those other pieces in place, we're seeing lower behavior incidents as well, and making sure we're talking intentionally about our behavior expectations and how we meet those. And we saw a significant reduction in the number of behavior referrals in the last couple of years as well. Beyond the classroom, some really exciting piece here. I think this is where community gets excited as well. Is we had 18 different teams groups compete in state level competitions as well as some national level competitions last year. That's really exciting. The only spot it wasn't exciting, probably, Sarah, was in your world. We didn't budget necessarily for 18 teams to have that level of success last year.
Who knew?
But certainly it's money that we're excited to spend and excited to send our kids to participate in those things, because that's great opportunities. That's things that they'll carry with them their whole lives. So that was really great last year. We have such a wide variety of activities that happen in our classrooms, and ways, we talk about meeting individual needs again. I'm going to go back to that. It's the ways we connect kids to school and get them engaged in school, and all these different opportunities, extracurriculars, are a big part of how that happens in our classrooms.
Definitely. It's been fun to see the excitement around all these activities, and I think we see some pretty promising hope for this year as well.
Yeah, we're off to a great start already.
Seasons. Yeah. All right, so we're going to focus a little bit more now on some of the challenges that we're facing coming into this year, and really over the last couple of years that we've been dealing with. And like many districts across the state, our funding, unfortunately, has not been able to keep pace with the costs of providing these services to our students and staff each year. And one of the things to point out is that we continue to see eroding state funding. So our general education state funding is probably our biggest pot of funding that we receive from the state each year. And over the past 20 years, it simply has not kept up with the rate of inflation year over year. And at this point, looking back to comparing to where we were at 20 years ago, we're seeing a little over an 18% gap in that inflation rate versus what we're actually receiving for our funding. And this is very problematic when it comes to being able to provide all of these great services that we want to continue providing and build upon for our students. And we've seen over this last year, we went into the year knowing that we would be going into it with a deficit budget to the tune of $1.3 to $2 million. And this obviously puts our reserves funding at risk. But the good news is that in the past, we have been very fiscally responsible and did have a good reserve base built up to accommodate years such as this, where we have these kind of challenges. But unfortunately, we're continuing to see this to be a problem into the future. And we are coming into this current school year, again, predicting anywhere from $1.5 to $2 million as a deficit, depending on how things land. So what we're going to need to do is take a look at those reserve funds. We've listened to our staff saying, that we really want to utilize those reserves, spend them down some, but it's not something that we can continue to do. And we are to the point where we are going to be jeopardizing our ability to cash flow and have funds available for those emergencies like we saw this summer. So going into 2 years of having deficit budgets, we do need to make a change, whether that be having a referendum get approved or some significant cuts to get things leveled out for us.
Right, just like any other business in the community, when you're facing financial challenges, your options are either to increase revenues or decrease expenses. So the same thing for us, just that looks different for a school district. We can't increase prices because we're a public education. Right. So only way to increase revenues is through a referendum like this. I'll say Marshall is one of the very few districts in the state that does not currently have an operating referendum. And I just want to point out, too, when we talk about these challenges, this isn't a new challenge. This is something we faced for a number of years. Back in 2022, we asked the community for an operating referendum. It was the same need that we're looking at now, and a similar cost to what it is now. The need continues to be there. We had some COVID funds that came in at that time, and they helped get us by and help cover some of these expenses, but those funds are gone. So like Sarah mentioned, we are now at the spot there. We've intentionally spent down some reserves. We've made some targeted cuts trying to avoid some classroom things, but we're at the spot where in order to keep moving forward, we need to either increase revenues or look at some reductions in our funds.
So if we do have to make these cuts, it is going to have a significant impact on our classrooms. We're going to see larger class sizes, fewer programs that we're going to be able to offer. We're going to have to cut our teachers and various staff across the district to make this happen. So one thing I wanted to share too is this graph that represents the general fund expenses per student, which does exclude our capital expenditures, but you can see here that in 2024, our per student cost was $14,107. And in 2024, as I had mentioned before, our general education formula allowance that we receive was $7,138. So barely covering half of what our actual expenses are per student going into each year. So we, again, continue to see this gap grow, and we need something to happen in order to decrease that gap. So what we've been working on really over this past year is coming up with a plan to propose a operating referendum in the amount of $2 million. And this will be a 10-year operating referendum, and we'll have the inflation adjustment included in that plan. So what the purpose of this again is to support all the things that Jeremy has already mentioned, from our day-to-day operations, keeping our teachers and staff employed. It's going to help cover our supplies, our various programs that we're offering students, obviously our utility and maintenance expenses that we unfortunately don't have a lot of control over. So the impact on this is being able to sustain those reading and math and CTE programs that we've done so much to build up over the years, and we really don't want to lose that programming or the momentum that we've already gained. We also have a lot of great student support services in place that we potentially may have to make reductions in. And again, we have looked at some extracurricular activities that we would have to reduce in order to get by if the referendum is not in place. So basically the levy is designed to be a reasonable and shared investment across the community into our schools. The nice part about this is that we do have that local control. All the funds are paid by our community taxpayers, and the funds do stay directly or stay with our schools. What this would look like, we had the county provide us with what the median value of a home is in the Marshall District, and they've pinpointed that at $225,000. So that's the median home value in Marshall. And for that size home, we would see about a $26 a month increase to property taxes, just to give everyone an idea of what that looks like. So again, the focus is on sustaining the programming that we already have in place and our staff and student supports. Unfortunately, if the referendum were to fail, without this additional funding, we are going to face multi-year cuts that will affect our classrooms and our learning. Initially, the cuts would be significant going into that first year. We're targeting anywhere between $1.8 to $2 million for those cuts going into the school year next year if the referendum were not to pass. We've spent a lot of time actually working on and really taking careful consideration to the various staffing reductions that we would need to put in place. This is going to include teachers, our aides, various specialists in different areas, and support staff across all district buildings. And at this point, we have identified 29 positions specifically that will end up having to be eliminated. And, the consequences of this will be real. We are going to see larger class sizes and less individual attention for our students. Again, we're going to end up having to offer fewer programs to our students. The electives will be reduced. Extracurriculars that we have currently offered will get reduced. And some of those specialized courses will likely be cut. We really want to get out into the community, share information regarding the referendum. We know you're listening, and we want to answer any questions that are out there and that anyone may have for us. So what we did is we have a website that is live and available to all of our community to go ahead and take a look at, and that is tomorrowstigers.org. We have a ton of information out there for you, lots of FAQs. There's also a great property tax calculator out there where you can plug in your actual property information, whether that be your home or a business, to look at what the direct impact to your property taxes will be if this referendum were to pass. There's also an option to submit questions to us. We check that regularly and get back to folks with any questions that are out there. So we just want to keep the dialogue open and conversations open with all parents, staff, and community members to make sure everyone is able to make an informed decision. And I guess we can't stress enough that we want all of our community to get out there and vote when this election does come up. So Election Day is Tuesday, November 4th, and there will be early absentee voting that starts September 19th. And this year, because the only thing on the ballot for this election is this referendum, the voting will actually take place at the school district, and the building that has been identified for the voting to take place is the school's district office, which is located in the middle school.
Yeah. So thank you, Sarah, for coming and joining and helping share some information with our viewers. Certainly want to make sure you're informed, you have the information, so I can't stress enough, check out that website, the microsite we've created, the tomorrowstigers.org. There's a lot of information on there. Reach out if you have questions, and like Sarah said, we hope to see everyone getting out there and voting this fall. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks.